winter storm closed in on a quiet farm outside Madison, Wisconsin, when a thin line of fire suddenly crawled up the hay barn like something alive. Megan Brooks froze on the porch, her 10-year-old son Caleb staring in terror, because the flames were moving too fast to be an accident. Out in the snow, Ethan Walker, a 40-year-old ex-Navy SEAL with a bad left knee, sprinted toward the smoke in a Navy parka and red and black flannel. Beside Ethan Walker, Ranger, a 5-year-old black and tan German Shepherd, stayed silent and focused, turning chaos into a rescue. Goats surged, chickens scattered, a calf screamed, and the barn wall began to collapse. Then the unthinkable happened. Ranger disappeared into the smoke, and Ethan Walker realized someone did not just want the animals dead. Someone wanted the whole farm
Ranger,
gone.
go!
If this story grabs
Get out of
you,
here!
share it.
Now!
Comment what Ranger should do next, and subscribe for more rescue stories. Snow fell in thin, stubborn sheets outside Madison, Wisconsin. The wind kept worrying at the fields like it wanted to peel them bare. The road was a pale ribbon, and every mile felt quieter than the last. Ethan Walker drove with both hands steady on the wheel, even when his left knee throbbed from the cold and the long hours. Pain was an old companion now. It never spoke. It just showed up and took a seat. He did not come to Wisconsin to start over in any heroic way. He came to disappear. To find a corner of the country where no one asked what he used to be or what he could not forget. In the passenger seat, Ranger sat upright, black and tan coat glossy against the gray day. The German Shepherd's ears stayed pricked, eyes amber brown and alert, scanning the roadside without drama. Ranger did not bark at shadows or chase noise. Ranger watched, measured, and waited. A black service harness lay snug against Ranger's chest. A patch clear enough to read from a distance. Service dog. Do not pet. Ethan's navy winter parka brushed his thighs when he shifted, and beneath it, the red and black plaid flannel felt like the only familiar thing he still trusted. Faded jeans, brown leather boots. The uniform he chose for a life that was supposed to be simple. Then the boy appeared. A small figure in a puffy coat stood at a farm gate half buried in snow. He was tugging at a chain that had frozen stiff, cheeks red from wind, stubborn as a little mule. Ranger's head tilted once, the way he did when something mattered. Ethan slowed, pulled onto the shoulder, and stepped out. The air hit his face like a slap. He walked with a slight stiffness, favoring the left knee without thinking. "You need a hand?" Ethan called. The boy turned. 10, maybe. Skinny, quick-eyed, trying hard not to look scared of a stranger. "It's stuck," he said. And then, like he had to explain himself to the world, "Mom's busy." Ethan crouched, tested the chain, and felt the ice grip. He worked it loose with steady pressure, not force. Ranger stood close, calm but ready, eyes flicking between Ethan and the boy. When the gate finally gave, the boy's shoulders dropped with relief. "Thanks," he said. Then he looked at Ranger with open admiration. He's like a cop dog." Ranger did not react to the praise. Ranger simply watched the farm beyond the gate, as if counting everything that could go wrong. A woman stepped out from the barn, wiping her hands on a worn rag. Megan Brooks looked like someone who had been carrying weight for too long and had not had the option to put it down. She was in her mid-30s, white, slim from work rather than choice, brown hair pulled into a low tie with loose strands whipping in the wind. Her eyes were tired, but they held a stubborn spark that refused to go out. Caleb shifted closer to her, proud now that a stranger had helped. "Mom, he fixed it." Megan gave Ethan a careful look. Not unfriendly, just protective. "I appreciate it," she said. Her voice was steady, but there was strain underneath, like a board with a crack you could not see until it broke. "We've had trouble with that gate all week." Ethan nodded once. He did not offer his whole story. He rarely did anymore. "I was passing through." Megan's gaze dropped to Ranger's harness patch, then back to Ethan's face. She noticed details, the way people did when they had learned to be cautious. The squared jaw, the short, neat beard with a few silver threads, the eyes that could be warm and still hold something sharp behind them. "Caleb," Megan said, "go inside. Warm up." Caleb hesitated, then obeyed, but his head turned twice to look at Ranger as he walked away. Megan waited until her son was out of earshot. "You need something?" she asked. Ethan looked past her at the farm. The buildings were old but cared for. The fences had been patched more than replaced. There was a feeling here of people doing their best with what they had. He recognized that kind of exhaustion. He had lived inside it. "I'm not looking to buy anything," Ethan said, and a corner of his mouth lifted just enough to show he knew how suspicious he sounded. "I'm looking for work. Odd jobs, fixing things. I can trade labor for a room." Megan's eyes narrowed, not cruelly, practically. "Why?" The question landed heavier than it should have. Ethan could have lied easily. He had lied to himself for years. Instead, he said, "Because I'm good with my hands, and because sleeping in the truck stops working after a while." Megan studied him. Ranger stayed still, a quiet anchor between them. "We don't have much," Megan said at last, "but I could use help. The barn door sticks, the water line freezes, fences keep giving out." She frowned like she did not want to admit that last part. "If you're serious, I've got a spare room above the mudroom. It's small." "Small is fine," Ethan said. Megan led him across the yard. As they walked, Ethan noticed how Ranger's attention moved. Not frantic, not nervous, just thorough. Ranger glanced toward the chicken coop, then toward the hay storage, then to the far fence line. Like Ranger was reading a story, written in tracks and scent. Inside the house, warmth wrapped around them. The smell of coffee and wood and something faintly sweet. Caleb hovered in the doorway, curiosity warring with shyness. His eyes stayed on Ranger. "He won't bite," Ethan said. Caleb's face brightened. "Can I pet him?" Megan answered before Ethan could. "Read the harness." Caleb squinted at the patch and then looked guilty, like he had broken a rule in a church. "Sorry." Ethan felt something tighten in his chest. Not pain. Something else. Something like gratitude. Ranger had been his bridge through days that felt too loud inside his own skull. People did not always understand what that meant. "It's okay," Ethan told Caleb. "He's working, but you can say hi." Caleb gave Ranger a careful wave. Ranger blinked slowly and stayed calm, as if granting permission for the boy to exist close by. That night, Ethan ate at their small kitchen table. Megan spoke in short sentences, like she was rationing energy. Caleb talked enough for both of them. He told Ethan about the goats, the old mare in the far stall, and the mean wind that made the windows rattle. Ethan listened, and part of him felt the strange ache of being included. Later, when the house quieted, Ethan stepped outside with Ranger. The farm lay under moonlight and snow, still and vulnerable. Ethan breathed in and tried to convince his mind that silence could be safe. Ranger walked the perimeter near the barn with practiced calm, then paused by the hay storage. Ranger's head lowered. Ranger sniffed, slow and deliberate. Then Ranger lifted his gaze to Ethan. Not fear, not excitement, just a clear signal. Pay attention. Ethan moved closer, eyes scanning. He saw scuff marks near the door, fresh against the frozen ground. A thin scrape in the wood, as if something had been forced and then covered up. A sound came from the road. Tires on snow. A low engine note. Headlights swept across the yard, smooth and confident. A black sedan rolled up to the gate like it owned the place. Ethan stood still, his navy parka dark against the snow, flannel collar visible at his throat. Megan stepped onto the porch, shoulders tense. A man got out, mid-40s, white, clean cut in a way that felt practiced. His coat was dark and expensive, his shoes too polished for this weather. He wore a polite smile like armor, and his eyes stayed cold. "Evening," he called, voice friendly enough for strangers. "Megan Brooks?" Megan's jaw tightened. "Grant Harlow." Grant Harlow lifted a folder as if it were a gift. "I've been trying to catch you at a better time. I heard things are getting rough out here." Megan did not move closer. "We're fine." Grant Harlow's smile widened. "Of course. Still, I brought an offer. A fair one. Quick cash. No more stress." Ethan watched the distance between them, the way Megan's hands curled at her sides, the way Grant Harlow stood comfortably on her land. Ranger stayed beside Ethan, silent, eyes fixed on the newcomer. Grant Harlow noticed Ethan then. His eyes flicked over the flannel, the boots, the calm stance. The smile did not change, but something in the gaze sharpened. "And you are?" Grant Harlow asked. "Just passing through," Ethan said. Grant Harlow nodded as if he believed it, which meant he did not. "Well," he said to Megan, holding out the folder again. "Think about it. I'll be back." Megan's voice was flat. "Don't." Grant Harlow's smile held. "You can't blame a man for trying to help." He turned, climbed back into the sedan, and drove off, leaving the yard bright for a moment, and then dark again. Megan stayed on the porch, staring at the tracks the car left in the snow. Ethan could feel the tension rolling off her like heat. Ranger did not look at the road. Ranger looked back toward the hay storage. Ethan followed Ranger's gaze, and the quiet felt different now. Not peaceful. Watched. Footprints in the snow. A hard wind rolled over the fields, sharpening the cold. Snow packed into crust along the fence posts. Somewhere beyond the barn, a loose board tapped like a warning that refused to stop. Ethan woke before dawn the way he always did, as if his body still owed a report to some unseen clock. The spare room above the mudroom was small, but the quiet in it felt honest. For a moment, he almost believed he could stay asleep. Then his left knee pulsed with that familiar ache, and the spell broke. Downstairs, he pulled on the same clothes that had become his chosen armor for a simpler life. Navy winter parka, red and black plaid flannel, faded jeans, brown leather boots. Ranger was already up, sitting squarely at the door, ears pricked, amber-brown eyes steady. The black harness on Ranger's chest made the message impossible to miss. Service dog. Do not pet. Megan was in the kitchen with a mug of coffee that had gone cold before she remembered to drink it. She looked tired in a way that had nothing to do with sleep. She looked like a person listening for bad news even when the room was silent. "Water line froze again," she said. Her voice was flat, but Ethan heard the edge under it. Not anger. Where? "I drained it last night." Ethan nodded. He followed her outside, boots crunching on snow crust. Ranger moved with them, quiet and watchful, head turning in slow angles, as if measuring the farm the way Ethan measured a street corner. They found the problem at the side spigot. The valve had been twisted past its stop, forced hard enough to crack the housing. Ice had spread from the break like spilled glass. Megan stared at it, and the tightness in her shoulders got worse. "That doesn't happen on its own," she said. Ethan crouched, careful with his knee, and ran a gloved thumb along the metal. The edge felt fresh, sharp. Not an old break. He looked up and saw Caleb standing in the doorway, small and pale against the warm light behind him. Caleb's eyes darted from Ethan to the valve. "I didn't touch it," he blurted, like he had been accused by the air itself. "I know," Megan said quickly. Her tone softened, but her face did not. Ethan stood, slow. "Someone did it," he said. Not dramatic, just certain. Megan exhaled through her nose. "We've had a run of luck, that's all." He watched her try to make it smaller with words. Ethan recognized that impulse. If you could name something as bad luck, you did not have to fight it. You could just endure it and hope it passed. But the farm was not being haunted by luck. It was being handled. That afternoon, the fence on the north edge gave out. That was Megan's phrase. Ethan walked it and found a clean cut where wire should have been twisted. It had been repaired just enough to look accidental from a distance, the way a lie looks like truth if you squint. Ranger stopped at the broken section and lowered his nose to the snow. The dog did not bark. Ranger did not growl. Ranger simply stood still, then looked up at Ethan with a calm, pointed intensity. Ethan followed Ranger's gaze down the fence line and saw prints. Boot prints that did not belong to Megan. Too wide, too deep, made by someone who moved without caring about noise. A memory rose in Ethan's throat, bitter as smoke. Night patrols. The first sign of trouble always being something small, something that could be ignored if you wanted peace more than truth. Ethan swallowed it down. He was not that man anymore. He was trying not to be. Inside the barn, Megan fed the goats with quick, practiced motions. Caleb trailed behind her, asking questions she answered with half sentences. She was trying to keep the day normal for him. Ethan respected that. He also knew normal was a costume that ripped easily. That night, the goats went restless. It started as a ripple of movement, hooves shifting, bodies pressing against pen rails. Then came the sound of panic, not loud but sharp, as if fear had teeth. Megan rushed out in her coat, hair whipping loose around her face. Caleb hovered at the threshold, too brave to leave, too young to understand what bravery cost. Ethan stepped into the pen, moving slow. Ranger stayed at his side, posture controlled. The goats were staring toward the far edge of the property, where the trees huddled like a dark wall. "There's nothing out there," Megan said, but her voice didn't fully believe it. Ranger lifted Ranger's head, nostrils flaring. Ranger's ears pivoted toward the hay storage. Ethan caught it, the shift of Ranger's attention, and his own body tightened in response. He left the pen and walked toward the storage building, Megan following a few steps behind. The air smelled like cold wood and manure and wind. Then Ethan caught a faint note under it all. Not strong enough to name at first, something oily, sharp, wrong in a place that should only smell like straw. Megan saw his face change. "What is it?" Ethan didn't answer right away. He crouched near the door, ran his fingers along the base where snow had been kicked aside. Ranger lowered Ranger's nose to the same spot, breathing slow. Ranger's tail stayed still, not wagging, not tucked. Focused. Gasoline, Ethan thought. Or something close enough to it. He stood, heart beating in a way he hadn't felt in months. "Someone's been here," he said quietly. Megan's eyes widened, and the fear she had been holding back finally broke through the surface. "Grant Harlow," she whispered, like saying the name might summon him. Ethan remembered the sedan's clean tires, the polished shoes, the smile that didn't touch the eyes. He remembered how comfortable that man had been standing on Megan's land. "Could be," Ethan said. "Could be someone working for him. Either way, it's not random." Megan's mouth trembled once, then she forced it still. "What do I do?" Ethan looked at her, and something in him hardened. Not into violence, but into clarity. The world had taken enough from people like Megan, and it always did it politely first. "We keep Caleb inside tonight," Ethan said. "We stay alert, and we don't pretend this is nothing." Megan nodded, but Ethan could tell she wanted to protest. She wanted to believe she could outwork the danger the way she outworked the cold, the bills, the loneliness. Ethan knew that belief. It was brave, and it was also a trap. The next day, the storm warnings came over the radio. Wind chill dropping. Snowfall expected to thicken. Megan moved faster, trying to secure everything before the weather closed in. Ethan helped without being asked, reinforcing latches, stacking feed, checking the generator. By dusk, the sky turned the color of dirty wool. The wind found every crack in the barn boards and pushed through, whistling like a threat. The power flickered once, then again. Megan's face went tight. "If we lose heat—" "I'll handle it," Ethan said, already moving. He stood at the breaker panel in his navy parka, flannel collar visible, hands steady in the dim light. Ranger waited behind him, harness patch catching the glow like a small warning sign. The power steadied for a moment. Ethan exhaled. Then Ranger shifted. Ranger's head lifted, ears rigid, eyes fixed toward the hay storage. Ranger did not bark. Ranger stepped forward, stopped, then turned back and pressed against Ethan's left knee with a firm nudge. It wasn't panic. It was instruction. Ethan's stomach dropped. He grabbed a flashlight and moved into the yard, Megan close behind, her breath coming fast. Snow stung Ethan's face. Wind yanked at his coat. And then he saw it. A thin, cruel tongue of orange light licking up from the side of the hay storage. Small at first, almost delicate. Then the wind hit it, and it became hungry. Ethan didn't speak. Megan made a sound that was half a gasp and half a prayer. Ranger stood perfectly still, watching the fire like it was a living enemy that had finally shown its face. The run through fire. The wind shifted and fed the flames. Snow blew sideways, turning to steam near the heat. The night became a tunnel of orange light and black smoke, and the farm sounded like it was holding its breath. Ethan moved before his mind finished naming what he saw. The hay storage was burning from the side, not from the roof, and the fire climbed fast, as if it already knew where to go. That was the part that hit him hardest. Fire was supposed to be wild. This looked guided. He tightened his navy parka with one hand and felt the red and black flannel beneath it, warm against his chest. His boots bit into the churned snow. Ranger stood beside him, body still, ears rigid, eyes locked on the flames. The black harness across Ranger's chest caught the flicker of light. Service dog, do not pet, flashed in and out like a warning sign in a storm. Megan ran out behind him, breath ragged. Her face was pale, but her eyes were sharp with a mother's fear. Caleb hovered in the doorway, frozen between obedience and panic. "Inside!" Megan snapped at Caleb, voice cracking. "Now!" Caleb flinched, but did not move fast enough. He was staring at the fire like he could not believe it was real. Ethan stepped closer to the boy, lowering his voice without softening it. "Caleb, go. Lock the door. Call 911 if your mom doesn't. Do it right now." Something in Ethan's tone reached the part of Caleb that still trusted adults. Caleb turned and ran. Megan lifted her phone with shaking hands. Her thumb slipped twice before it found the right screen. "I'm calling," she said, like she needed Ethan to hear it. "Good," Ethan said. He did not look back. "Stay with Caleb. Do not come past the porch." Megan's mouth opened to argue. Then she saw his eyes, saw the calm inside them that did not belong to a normal man on a normal night. She swallowed the protest and nodded once. Ethan's left knee screamed when he took off toward the nearest gate. The pain tried to drag him down into memory. He ignored it, the way he had learned to ignore everything that threatened to slow a mission. Ranger moved with him, quiet as a shadow. The wind shoved the flames sideways. The fire leapt from the hay storage toward the barn wall, licking along the dry wood like it had been waiting for permission. Smoke poured low, thick and bitter. Ethan forced his lungs to take smaller breaths, quick and controlled. "Goats first," he muttered, thinking out loud the way he did when he needed his mind to stay organized. He swung open the small pen gate. The goats surged forward, eyes wild, hooves slipping. Ethan spread his arms and stepped into their path, guiding them toward the wider lane that led away from the buildings. Ranger did not bark. Ranger did not snap. Ranger placed Ranger's body at the edge of the moving herd, cutting off the wrong turn with a simple shift of weight. Ranger's head stayed low, eyes intent, giving pressure without panic. The goats followed, not because they understood heroism, but because Ranger's calm felt like a map. Ethan ran ahead, yanked open the field gate, and waved the goats through. Snow and smoke stung his eyes. He blinked hard and kept moving. A sharp crack sounded behind him. A plank popped in the heat. The barn groaned like an animal in pain. Chickens were next. Ethan sprinted to the coop. The latch was hot, but not yet glowing. He hooked it open and stepped back as feathers exploded into the air, birds bursting out in frantic, confused flight. Some ran along the ground, slipping in the slush. Some flapped into the smoke and vanished, then reappeared as dark shapes against the firelight. Ranger darted in, quick and precise, not chasing but steering. Ranger blocked one bird's attempt to sprint back toward the burning side, then pivoted to keep the rest moving toward the open yard. Ethan's mind tried to count. He hated not knowing if everyone made it. That was an old wound, too. A sudden, thin sound cut through the chaos. A calf. Ethan's head snapped toward the cattle pen. A small, black and white calf was jammed between two broken rails, twisting and crying, eyes rolling white. The larger cows crowded behind it, panicking, making the space tighter. Ethan jumped the low fence, landed wrong, and his left knee buckled. Pain shot up his thigh like lightning. For a fraction of a second, the world tilted. Ranger was there at once, not touching him, just close. Ranger's eyes met his. Ethan did not need comfort. He needed time. Ranger gave him that by standing steady, by making the moment feel controlled again. Ethan forced weight onto his good leg and dropped to one knee anyway. He hooked his hands around the splintered rail and pulled. The wood resisted, then gave with a crack. The calf lunged free and stumbled forward. Ethan slapped the rail once, hard. Go! The cows surged, and Ranger slipped to the side, guiding them through the gap, keeping the calf with them. No barking, just presence and direction. The horse stall was the last and the worst. Smoke had thickened near the barn, rolling along the ground. The mare in the far stall stamped and screamed, eyes wide, body angled like she was ready to fight the walls. Ethan could see why she would not move. Firelight flickered through the slats. Heat made the air shimmer. Every instinct in her said the doorway was a trap. Ethan tasted ash and thought of other nights, other trapped spaces, other living things that could not understand why the world had turned murderous. He reached for the stall door. It was hot. He jerked his hand back and swore under his breath. Ranger stepped forward, slow, controlled. Ranger faced the mare at a safe distance, head slightly lowered, posture loose but confident. Ranger did not challenge her. Ranger offered something she could follow. The mare's head bobbed, nostrils flaring. Her hooves skittered on the boards. She looked ready to bolt into anything, even flames. Ethan kept his voice low, steady. Easy, easy. Ranger shifted one step to the side, opening a line. The mare's eyes flicked to Ranger, then to Ethan, then back to Ranger. Ranger held the calm like a candle in the wind. The mare surged forward. Ethan braced, heart pounding, and pulled the door wide. Ranger stepped back just enough to clear the path. The mare burst into the yard, sides heaving, then stumbled as the cold hit her lungs. She did not turn back. Ethan's chest loosened for a single beat, then the barn wall snapped. A section of burning wood collapsed inward with a roar that drowned out everything. Sparks sprayed. The shockwave hit Ethan like a shove. He threw his arm out to shield his face. The doorway behind him became a curtain of flame and falling boards. Ethan turned, searching for the open lane he had used seconds ago. It was gone. Smoke swallowed the interior. Heat pressed in from all sides. His left knee screamed again as he tried to move fast on a leg that did not want to obey. "Ranger!" he shouted, voice rough, louder than he meant. For the first time that night, fear broke through Ethan's control. Not fear of dying, fear of losing the only being who had carried him through the worst parts of himself. Ranger was there for a heartbeat, eyes bright in the smoke. Then Ranger pivoted and disappeared into the darkness of the barn, moving towards something Ethan could not see. Ethan stared after Ranger, throat tight, smoke burning his lungs. And the fire kept coming. The exit no one saw. Snow and ash drifted together, strange twins in the same wind. The storm kept pushing, and the fire answered back, turning the night into a boiling orange blur around the barn. Ethan could not see the doorway anymore. He could only feel heat pressing against his face and hear wood cracking like bones. His left knee buckled when he tried to step over a fallen board. Pain flared up his leg, sharp enough to steal breath. He forced himself upright anyway, because stopping was not an option. Not in here. Not with smoke thickening, not with Ranger gone. "Ranger!" Ethan called again, voice rough, and it tasted like ash the moment it left his mouth. The harness patch had flashed in his mind like a lighthouse. Service dog, do not pet. A rule for strangers, a reminder for the world. For Ethan, it meant something else. It meant Ranger was not just a dog in a crisis. Ranger was the reason Ethan still knew how to come back from one. The barn groaned. The sound was low and long, like a warning before a collapse. Ethan's eyes watered. He tried to blink smoke away. In the dim light, every shadow looked like a doorway, and every doorway looked like a trap. He moved one step at a time, shoulders hunched, breath shallow. Old training kept his panic in a tight fist, but the fist was shaking. Then he heard it. Not a bark, not a growl. Scratching, steady and urgent, from somewhere to his right. Ethan turned his head toward the sound and saw Ranger's outline through the smoke. Ears up, body low. Ranger was at the barn's side wall, paws working at a section where boards met the ground. Ranger wasn't frantic. Ranger was methodical, like the dog had already solved the problem and was now forcing the world to agree. Ranger paused, looked back at Ethan, eyes bright in the firelight. Come. Now. Ethan limped closer, feeling his knee protest with every step. The air was hotter here, but the smoke seemed to move differently, drawn toward gaps like a living thing hunting for escape. Ranger wedged a paw under a loose plank and pulled. The board shifted. Behind it was a narrow opening, low to the ground, leading out into the night. Ethan stared at it. It was not much, but it was air. Ranger backed up and pressed in close, then caught Ethan's sleeve with gentle teeth and tugged. Not hard, not panicked, just firm enough to make Ethan move. Ethan dropped to his hands and knees. The straw was damp under him, slick with melted snow carried in by wind. Heat breathed down his back. He pushed his shoulder through the gap, gritted his teeth as pain sparked in his knee, and crawled. Cold air hit his face like a clean slap. He tumbled out into the yard, coughing hard, and rolled onto his side. Ranger followed immediately, slipping through the opening with the same control, then turning to look back once, as if checking that nothing else inside needed saving. A second later, the barn behind them gave a violent crack. Part of the roof sagged and dropped inward with a roar, sending a fountain of sparks into the storm. Megan was running across the yard toward them, her hair loose now, cheeks wet, eyes wild with fear. Caleb was behind her, smaller, trembling, but refusing to stay inside. Megan reached Ethan first and grabbed his coat sleeve like she needed proof he was real. "Ethan," she said, voice breaking. "I thought—" Ethan couldn't answer right away. He was still pulling smoke out of his lungs. Ranger stood close at his shoulder, black and tan coat dusted with ash, harness patch catching light as the flames surged behind them. Service dog, do not pet. Even now, Ranger looked like work. Caleb stepped forward and stopped when he saw the harness, his hands clenched and unclenched in the air. He wanted to throw his arms around Ranger and did not dare. Ranger turned his head and looked at Caleb. Calm, present, the kind of steady that made a child feel like the world might stop falling apart. Sirens cut through the wind. Red lights bounced off snowbanks as a fire engine rolled in, tires grinding over ice. Firefighters moved fast, shapes in heavy gear, faces half hidden behind masks and frost. A woman jumped down from the engine and started issuing directions in a clear, sharp voice. She was in her early 40s, strong-built, hair pulled tight under her helmet, eyes focused like a blade. Her name patch read, Park. Captain Linda Park scanned the scene in one sweeping look, then pointed. "Hose line to the barn wall. Protect the house. Watch that wind. Move." Her team moved like they had practiced this nightmare 100 times. Megan clutched her phone with numb fingers. "I called. I tried to tell them the hay." Captain Park nodded once, already listening and moving. "You did right. Get everyone back, away from the smoke." Ethan forced himself upright, leaning weight onto his right leg. His left knee felt like it was filled with broken glass. He didn't show it. He didn't want Caleb watching him fall apart. Ranger stayed close, shoulder aligned with Ethan's thigh, as if offering balance without touching. Water slammed into the burning wall. Steam exploded upward, white and violent. For a moment the yard looked like it had its own storm, born from fire and water fighting in the same breath. When the flames finally shrank back enough to stop leaping toward the house, Ethan's body began to understand what had almost happened. His hands shook slightly, not from cold. Megan looked at Ranger with something like awe and grief mixed together. "Ranger brought you out," she said softly. Ethan nodded. His throat tightened. "Ranger found the exit." The words felt too small for what Ranger had done, but they were all Ethan had. Another set of headlights cut through the snow. A sheriff's SUV rolled in and stopped near the drive. A man stepped out, broad-shouldered, mid-50s, hair cut short and gray at the edges. His face looked carved from practical decisions. He moved with the calm of someone who had seen too many emergencies to be impressed by chaos. Sheriff Dan Miller. Sheriff Miller approached with measured steps, eyes taking in the burned barn, the firefighters, Megan's shaking hands, Caleb's pale face, Ethan's soot-streaked jaw. "Ma'am," Sheriff Miller said to Megan, voice steady. "Any injuries?" Megan swallowed. "No, not bad ones." Sheriff Miller's gaze shifted to Ethan. "You live here?" "Just working here," Ethan said. Sheriff Miller nodded once, then looked at the burn pattern along the barn's side. "Could be electrical," he said, almost to himself. "Old wiring, dry hay, wind." Ethan's stomach tightened. He could see how easily the world wanted to label this as an accident and move on. He could see how that would serve the person who wanted the farm gone. Ethan glanced at Ranger. Ranger's eyes were fixed on the hay storage area, even now, even with the fire beaten back. "Sheriff," Ethan said quietly. The fire started low on the side, not up high, and there was a smell earlier. Sheriff Miller's eyes narrowed. "What kind of smell?" Ethan kept his voice controlled. "Something like fuel." Ranger noticed first. Ranger did not react to the conversation. Ranger just stood, alert, watching the burned edge of the storage like it was a memory that still had teeth. Sheriff Miller studied Ethan for a long moment. Then he nodded. "Show me." Ethan limped toward the blackened area, Ranger pacing beside him. The harness patch flickered in the fire engine lights. "Service dog, do not pet." The snow around the barn was trampled, melted, then frozen again in ridges. Ethan pointed to the lowest burn marks, the way the char spread outward. Ranger lowered his nose to the ground and stopped at one spot, perfectly still. Sheriff Miller crouched and scraped lightly at the slush with a gloved hand. The smell was faint, but it was there. Sharp. Wrong. Sheriff Miller stood, face tightening. "I'm not calling this an accident yet," he said. In the distance, beyond the barn, tire tracks cut a clean line through the snow toward the back road, half hidden by drifting flakes. Ethan stared at those tracks and felt something cold settle in his chest. This was not a fire. This was a message. When the field breathes again. Morning arrived pale and slow, the kind of winter light that looked borrowed. Smoke still clung to the barn's ribs, and the wind carried the last burnt scent across the frozen pasture like a memory refusing to leave. Ethan stood in the yard before anyone else woke, breath fogging the air. His navy parka hung heavy on his shoulders, the red and black flannel visible at the collar when he moved. The left knee ached with every shift of weight, but the ache felt honest. Pain meant he was still here. Ranger sat beside him, black and tan coat dusted with ash that no brush had fully removed. The German shepherd's ears stayed up, eyes amber-brown scanning the perimeter as if the night might come back and try again. The black harness sat across Ranger's chest, the patch stark against the gray morning. Service dog, do not pet. Ethan's hand hovered near Ranger's neck and stopped, remembering the rule. Not because the dog would mind, but because the rule had kept Ranger safe in crowds, and old habits were hard to break. Ethan let his fingers rest lightly instead, a brief touch that said, "Thank you," without turning it into a performance. Behind them, Megan opened the back door. She stepped out slowly, like someone afraid the cold would knock her down. In daylight, she looked even more exhausted, cheeks hollowed by stress, hair tied back with trembling patience. Caleb followed, wrapped in a thick coat, eyes puffy from a night of crying he tried to hide. Megan stared at the barn ruins and swallowed. "I keep thinking I should have heard something," she said. "I should have known." Ethan didn't answer right away. He'd heard that sentence in a different form from too many people. Soldiers, spouses, survivors. The mind always tried to rewrite the moment into a test you failed, because guilt felt more controllable than chaos. "You knew enough to fight for your place," Ethan said quietly. "That matters." Caleb stepped closer to Ranger, then stopped at the harness patch like he always did, reading it even when he already knew it. His hands trembled near his sides. "Ranger saved you," Caleb whispered. Ethan met the boy's eyes. "Ranger saved all of us." They spent the day in the kind of work that kept grief from growing too loud. Megan made calls to insurance and family. Ethan checked fence lines and counted animals twice. Every count ended the same way. Most were alive. Most was a miracle that still had a price tag in soot and loss. There had been one older animal that didn't make it. Megan didn't say much about it, but Ethan saw the way she paused near the empty stall, staring like she expected the world to apologize. It never did. By midday, Sheriff Dan Miller returned. The sheriff's face looked set in its usual practical lines, but his eyes had changed since the night before. They carried a new seriousness, the kind that came when a story stopped being simple. Sheriff Miller walked with Ethan along the blackened edge of the hay storage. Ranger paced beside them, quiet, harness patch catching flashes of winter sun through thin clouds. "I brought an evidence tech," Sheriff Miller said. A younger deputy stepped out of the SUV. He was lean, late 20s, pale from lack of sleep, hair cropped short and neat. His name tag read, Keller. Deputy Keller's eyes were focused and careful, the kind of person who treated details like they could speak if you listened long enough. He nodded at Ethan and kept his distance from Ranger, reading the patch and respecting it without being told. Deputy Keller crouched near the burn point and used a small tool to scrape slush into a sealed bag. "Smells like an accelerant," he said, voice professional, not dramatic. "Not strong, but it's here." Megan stood a few steps back, arms wrapped around herself. Her lips pressed tight. She looked like she wanted to say Grant Harlow's name out loud, like she needed the sheriff to agree before she dared believe it. Sheriff Miller looked at Ethan. "You said you noticed a smell before the fire." Ethan nodded. "And I saw tire tracks behind the barn leading to the back road. Fresh." Sheriff Miller glanced toward the tree line. "We found them again this morning. Snow drifted over part of it, but the line is there." Ranger stopped near the fence, nose dropping to the ground. The dog stood still for a beat, then moved with purpose toward a cluster of shrubs that bordered the property. Ranger's tail stayed neutral, ears forward, focused. Ethan followed without thinking. "Sheriff," he said, pointing. Sheriff Miller and Deputy Keller trailed behind, boots crunching over crusted snow. Ranger pushed through the shrubs and froze. Half buried in snow was a plastic container, scuffed and cheap, the kind used for gas. The cap was loose. The smell hit Ethan's nose even in the cold, faint but unmistakable. Ranger backed away and looked up at Ethan, eyes steady. Not proud, not excited, just certain. Deputy Keller swore softly, then caught himself. That's not electrical." Sheriff Miller's jaw tightened. "Bag it," he said. Megan let out a sound that was almost laughter, almost sobbing. "So I wasn't crazy," she whispered. "No," Ethan said. "You weren't." Sheriff Miller took Megan aside near the porch. Ethan could not hear every word, but he caught pieces. "We'll look at the gas station cameras. Any threats? That man who offered to buy... Name?" "Grant Harlow." The name moved through the air like a stain. 2 days later, the sheriff returned with a different look on his face. It wasn't victory. It was grim relief. "We got footage," Sheriff Miller told Ethan and Megan. "A rented pickup fueling up the night of the storm. Same time window, same back road route." The rental paperwork didn't go to Harlow directly. Megan's voice shook. "So he gets away." Sheriff Miller held up a hand. "Not if the driver talks." The driver did talk. Owen Pike was brought in that evening, escorted by Deputy Keller. Ethan saw him from the porch, thin and twitchy, hood up, eyes darting like a cornered animal. Mid-30s, white. The kind of man who looked like life had been chewing on him and he'd decided to chew back on someone smaller. Owen Pike avoided Megan's eyes. When his gaze landed on Ranger, his face tightened with a flash of fear he tried to hide. Sheriff Miller's voice was calm, even. "You want to keep lying, Owen? Or you want to tell me who paid you?" Owen Pike swallowed hard. "I didn't think it would go like that," he muttered. "It was supposed to scare her. Just scare her." Megan's hands curled into fists. "You burned my farm." Owen Pike flinched. I didn't want nobody hurt." Ethan stepped forward, then stopped himself. Anger felt easy. Too easy. He'd lived inside it before, and it never built anything. He looked at Megan instead, reminding himself who needed steadiness most. Sheriff Miller leaned in slightly, voice firm. "Who paid you?" Owen Pike broke. He rattled off a name of a middleman, a phone number, a promise of cash. Not Grant Harlow's voice, not Grant Harlow's signature, but a chain that pointed in the same direction. It wasn't the clean confession Megan wanted, but it was enough to open doors Grant Harlow had assumed were locked. When the sheriff drove off, the farm felt strangely quiet. The kind of quiet that came after a storm when you realize you're still standing and you don't know what to do with that fact. News traveled the way it always did in small places. A neighbor showed up with a truck bed full of lumber. Another brought feed. Someone left a cash envelope under the coffee can by the sink without signing a name. People Megan hadn't spoken to in months arrived with gloves and hammers, eyes soft with shame for not coming sooner. By the weekend, the skeleton of a new hay shed began to rise. Megan watched from the porch, cheeks wet, trying to smile through it. Caleb ran from person to person like he was collecting proof that the world could be kind. And Ranger moved among the workers quietly, staying close to Ethan, watching the edges of the property like a guardian who did not believe danger was gone just because daylight was present. Late that afternoon, Caleb sat on the steps and looked at Ranger's paws. "Is Ranger hurt?" he asked. Ethan followed his gaze. A small blistered patch on one paw pad, red under the fur. Not severe, but enough. Ethan knelt carefully, ignoring the complaint in his left knee, and checked it. Ranger did not pull away. Ranger's eyes stayed on Ethan's face, calm as ever. "He'll heal," Ethan said. Caleb's voice went small. "Heroes get hurt." Ethan's throat tightened. "They do," he said. "And they keep doing what's right anyway." That night, after the last neighbor left, Megan brought out 3 mugs of hot cocoa. She handed one to Ethan, one to Caleb, and set the third down near Ranger like it mattered to include him. Ranger sniffed it once and looked away, unimpressed. Caleb giggled, a real laugh that sounded like it came from someplace deeper than relief. Megan looked at Ethan over her mug. "You could leave," she said softly. "No one would blame you." Ethan stared out at the half-built shed, the field white under moonlight. He thought about the life he had been running from. He thought about the fire, the smoke, the moment Ranger's eyes had cut through it and said, "Come now." "I'm tired of leaving," Ethan said. Megan's eyes filled, but she blinked it back. "Then stay," she whispered. Ethan nodded once. Not like a promise made for romance, like a decision made for meaning. Ranger rested Ranger's head on Ethan's boot, just for a second, as if sealing it. Outside, the wind still moved across Madison's fields, but it didn't sound like a threat anymore. It sounded like breathing. Sometimes a miracle does not arrive as a bright sign in the sky. Sometimes it arrives as a quiet set of paws moving through smoke and fear. A dog who never speaks can still lead a whole herd away from fire, as if an unseen hand placed the right path in front of everyone at the exact moment it was needed. And maybe that is how God often works. God does not always remove the storm, but God places something inside the storm that is clear enough to follow. A strong feeling in the heart, a stranger who shows up at the right time, a courage that refuses to let evil win. In everyday life, it can look the same. Some days feel heavy. Some days fear feels louder than hope. And then God sends something small, a kind word, a helping hand, a second chance, to remind a person that nobody is truly alone. If this story touched you, remember this. Bravery can be as simple as choosing to do the right thing one more time. And sometimes, that small choice protects more than one life. Sometimes it protects a home, a family, and the faith that tomorrow can still be better. Please share this story with someone who needs hope today. Comment and tell everyone, what small miracle have you seen in your own life? And subscribe so you do not miss the next story. God bless you, and may the Lord keep you safe.